Hey guys, Devin here. This is going to be a little bit different of a video, a little bit more low key and casual. We get asked a lot about recording podcasts with Zoom. A lot of people have this platform already and they want to know, can they record their podcast virtually with Zoom? You totally can do this. You need to go in and optimize settings first in order to really set it up for a podcast recording. And that's exactly what we're going to do in today's video. So if you're looking to record your podcast with Zoom, stick around. We're going to jump into the settings right now. Okay, so we're here in Zoom. The first thing I will mention before we get started in all the settings is that we did a blog post on this topic last year. And most, if not all of these settings haven't changed. So all of this is going to apply. If you want to have written documentation of everything we're going to talk about, you can reference this blog post. It's got screenshots so you can follow along, and you can use this, or you can just go back to reference it if you run into any issues and need to troubleshoot. Everything is listed here. So feel free to use this as a resource. We'll link in the show notes. We'll give you a link to this post so you can reference it in the future. So with that, let's kind of get into it. The first thing I will mention is that when we're optimizing these settings, it's kind of a two-step process. The first process is the pre-recording settings that you'll need to set up. And then the second phase is the on-call settings. So the pre-recording settings is obviously, the settings you're going to optimize before you get into any recording. And this will kind of set as your default. So as you go from recording to recording, it stays that way. And then the on-call settings are what you'll set up while you're on the recording. With each individual participant, you'll need to make sure that they have these settings set so that you can maximize the potential of your raw recordings when you're done. So we're going to start with the pre-recording settings. One other thing I'll mention is that obviously I'm on Mac. These settings will apply to Mac or PC. Some of the terminology is different. Settings, preferences, same thing. But it's going to be much the same process for both PC and Mac. But anyway, so we're going to go to our settings. So we'll go here to our Zoom settings. We're going to want to go down this sidebar here to recording. Now, it's worth mentioning that Zoom gives you the option to record locally to your local drive on your computer or to the cloud. You can record both at the same time, which is what we recommend. We recommend utilizing both so you have options. We're going to optimize, or we're going to set this up for both, and we're going to choose certain settings here that are going to set us up for future recordings and give us what we need as far as files go. So the very first thing with the local recording, we want to choose a folder to store the recordings. I think it defaults to your documents. You can click right here to choose a new location. For this, we're just going to choose our desktop. This will now, when we're recording our Zoom calls, it will save to a folder on our desktop. You can choose whatever folder you want. Just make sure it's accessible so that you're able to access the recordings after the fact. The next step here, this choose location to save recordings after the meeting ends. You don't have to check this off. I usually do because this kind of gives us options after the recording. For whatever reason, it's going to default to saving the recordings to your desktop like we just set here. But if I'm done with the recording and I need to save it to my documents instead, this will give me an option to change it. So I turn that on just for options, just in case. Now, the next setting here is the most important setting that you're going to set for any settings moving forward. Record a separate audio file for each participant. We absolutely want this on. What this is going to do is, as you can imagine, record individual audio tracks for each individual participant. As opposed to, if this were off, it would consolidate all recordings into one stereo recording file and consolidate it. We don't want that. We want to be able to isolate individual participants for post-production. So this is what we want. We want to have individual tracks for everybody. The next couple of settings are if we're recording video. So if you're doing an audio-only podcast, you're not going to need to really worry about this. But for video purposes, we usually leave this off, display participant's name in the recording. We like to add that stuff in post-production, so we don't want that in the raw recording, so we leave that off. Optimize for third-party editor. Yes, we're going to want to turn this on. This is going to make the files a little bit bigger, and if you're recording to the cloud, it's going to take a little bit longer to upload, but this is going to optimize things for post-production with video. Down here is the cloud recording. So something to mention, if you're not seeing this section down here, it means that your cloud recording is turned off, and you're going to need to turn that on in your browser, which we're going to get to in a second. So this will just show you how much space you have in your cloud recording server, depending on the account that you have with Zoom. It's going to be larger or smaller. You can manage this and all your recordings by obviously clicking the manage button here, which will pop open your browser. And when you get there, it's going to give you a listing of all your cloud recordings. It'll also give you a listing of all your local recordings, but you'll only be able to access these recordings on the computer that they were recorded on. So just be aware of that. So you'll get your listing of cloud recordings, and you can, depending on how much space you have, you can export them and then delete them one by one if you need to add more space. While we're in here, we might as well go to our browser settings. Our settings in our browser. Zoom offers some additional settings. We want to go to our settings tab and then go to recording here. And this is going to give us a few other options. Now, the first thing I'm going to mention, you're going to see there's toggle buttons here. You have local recordings, which you can toggle on or off. And you have cloud recording, which you can toggle on or off. If, like we said in our original settings, if we were to go back to our recording settings in Zoom, if you're not seeing this recording section here, that just means you need to turn on this toggle. So just be aware, if you're not seeing it, go to your browser, go into settings, go to recording, and then turn on cloud recording. So some of these settings aren't a big deal. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, saving chat messages, save closed captioning as a VTT file. That's going to give you an additional file that you can upload to platforms like YouTube that will give you a transcription with your closed captions. You can leave that on, turn it off. It doesn't really matter. They're not embedded in the video file. It's separate. So feel free to use that if you'd like. Let's move on to cloud recordings. These are going to give you a host of options, and a lot of these preferences depend on how you want to set up your recordings, but we'll go through a few of them just so that you can be aware that they exist. And I'll point out the ones that are more important than others. Usually what we do is we check this box here, record active speaker, gallery view, and shared screen separately. And then you can actually choose which ones you want included. So these are going to save them as separate files. Again, this is for video, really, not the audio. But you can save these different files for active speaker, gallery view, and shared screen. And it gives you more options in post-production to be able to kind of edit these together. Okay, so just like with our local recordings, we have our record audio only files. We're going to want to make sure that that's checked off. It's going to record audio separate from video. Now, especially if you're audio only, you want this on, obviously. But this is also going to separate your video files from your audio files. You'll have two separate files to work with, which is always good. But again, very, very, very important. You can see that it defaults to record one audio file for all participants. That is going to consolidate all participants into one stereo file. We do not want that. We want to set this up to record a separate audio file for each participant. Now, what you'll notice is that both are checked, and this is fine. We don't hate the fact that we have one audio file for all participants. You can use this as reference. You can use it in an emergency if you need to. But we absolutely need to have record separate audio file for each participant checked off. Just like we did for local recordings, optimize the recording for third-party editor, make sure that that is checked. You can include an audio transcript if you'd like. That's totally up to you. We have our closed captioning options and so on and so forth. So that's pretty much it as far as the settings go for cloud and local recordings. Like I said, these are now set as default. So you're not going to need to set this up before each and every recording. Although I do go in and do a quick sweep whenever I'm getting ready to record. You know, I'll just kind of go to settings real quick, go to recording, and I'll make sure that everything's checked off that I need to be. And if I'm feeling really neurotic, I'll click my manage, I'll go to my settings here, and I'll double check my cloud recording to make sure that everything's set correctly. But this should be defaulted for until you change it in the future, so you have nothing to worry about. So let's go on to on-call settings. Okay, so we're here on a Zoom call, and we're going to set up our settings as if we were on a call or a recording with a guest or guests. So what you're going to want to do is set these settings up for yourself and then walk through any other participants that are on the call. You're going to walk them through this as well. So we want to take a look. First things first, we want to make sure that our audio and video sources are set up correctly. So you can direct them to choose their audio settings here. This is your audio and this is your video. Obviously, if I click this little caret, it's going to pop up my microphone, select a microphone and speaker. We look at these as our input. Our input is our microphone, and our output is our speaker or our headphones or whatever it may be. So I'm taking a look here. I can see that my microphone is selected correctly. If you're unsure if your microphone is selected correctly or if a guest's microphone is selected correctly, you can always have them scratch on the microphone like that. It should make a noise. And if you're not hearing that scratching sound, that would tip you off that the wrong microphone is selected, and you're going to need to figure out which input is the correct input. And you can kind of go through the list and have them scratch until you hear it. If you're not hearing the scratch at all, another thing you can do, we don't typically like to do this because it could damage the microphone, but lightly tapping it as well will also help out there. I almost default to doing this every recording anyway, just because if I'm speaking and you can hear me, that doesn't necessarily mean that the right microphone is turned on. There have been recordings that we've gotten in the past where they thought this beautiful microphone was set up, and in fact, it was just a laptop microphone that was picking up the sound. So definitely do not skip this step. Make sure that you're using the right microphone. And then as far as speakers go, make sure you're choosing the right output. If somebody can't hear you, if you're talking and they're like, I can't hear you, this is where they're going to set this up. Make sure that they have the right speakers selected. We always recommend using headphones. That should be standard practice. You should be wearing headphones when you're doing these recordings. So when you're going through this list, just make sure that the correct headphones are selected. You can do a test here. You can hear that it's testing my Mac Mini speakers. We can say yes. Now it's testing to make sure that my microphone is on. We can say yes, we are all set here. So that's another way you can test. Don't be fooled though. Like I said, your microphone can be selected, but it could be another microphone that is actually picking up the signal. So just make sure you have the right one selected. So now that we have our microphone and our speakers selected properly, we're gonna wanna go to our audio settings. You can get there conveniently right from this menu here, or if you go to Zoom settings, there is a sidebar here. You can just go to audio. Okay, so we're in our audio settings here, and we already have our speaker set. There's really not much that we want to change here. You can change the volume of your speakers or your headphones here. Not a big deal. Your microphone settings down here we already set. However, this is giving us a few other options that we should talk about real quick. The first thing is you have your input level meter. You can see that as I'm talking, the meter is kind of averaging in the middle here. That's what you want. You want this to mainly be green, and you want it to mainly be sticking in the middle of the bars here. If you see it that it's kind of averaging to the right and it's towards the top of the bar, and you see that mainly this bar is red, that's a problem. That means that you're peaking or distorting and you want to change that somehow. The way to do that is this input volume here. Now mine is grayed out because I'm using an audio interface, separate external audio interface. But if you're using your sound card, you should be able to pull this up and down and get the level to kind of average out to where we are here. And the best way to do that is to kind of count up to 10. 1, 2, 3. And as you're counting, you're dragging this bar and paying attention to the meter here to get it in the middle. I wouldn't worry so much about this. Don't drive yourself crazy. I'd rather you have a lower level than a hotter level. So the main takeaway here is make sure that you're not peaking and not distorting. And this isn't all in the red, because once it distorts, the audio is destroyed. There's not much we can do about it. So that's your input levels that you can set. There's also this option here to automatically adjust microphone level. It's grayed out for me because I'm using an audio interface, but for most people, this will be an option. Make sure this is turned off. What this is going to do is it's going to push your volume level up or down depending on how you're speaking, and we don't want that. We don't want volume levels fluctuating throughout the recording process. We want one flat level, and then we can make adjustments in post-production. So make sure that's turned off. Now, let's get to the next section here for audio profile. This is very important. So by default, Zoom sets your audio profile so that it's removing background noise. And you can set auto, low, medium, or high. What this is going to do is going to add processing to your audio, and it will try to detect background noise and knock the volume down whenever it detects this background noise. The problem is that it's not very good at it. So this is, I'm sure you've heard this before, where somebody's speaking and their audio kind of gets all digitally and kind of dips in volume and sometimes cuts out altogether briefly. This is Zoom trying to add processing to the audio file. We do not want this. This is going to destroy your audio. It's going to for sure make your podcast episode sound like it was recorded on Zoom. It's going to sound very amateur. You're going to want to turn this off. So how do we do that? You'll notice there's no checkbox here. That's fine. What we want to do is choose a different audio profile. And what we'll do is we'll choose original sound for musicians. And this is going to this is the original sound from my microphone. No processing, no changes. The settings available to us under this profile, we don't need to turn on. Stereo audio, don't worry about. Audio, high fidelity music mode, don't worry about. Echo cancellation is something we should pay attention to, though. This is processing. So what echo cancellation is doing is, especially if somebody's not wearing headphones, what happens is the sound comes out of the speakers into their microphone, out of your speakers, and then into your microphone, and it feedback loops. This echo cancellation will stop that. But if everybody's wearing headphones, like we should be, echo cancellation doesn't need to be turned on. And honestly, you should be turning this off because, like we said earlier, Zoom's not very good at audio processing. Things can get really bad if it's trying to, especially, if you're speaking with somebody, speaking over somebody, or laughing together or something, it's going to try to echo cancel, and it's going to knock one of the speakers down, if not most of the speakers. If you're on a panel, it'll knock most speakers down to allow one up front. We don't want that. We can do this sort of cancellation, or we can do this in post-production. So we would want to turn this off. If you get on a call and there is somebody not wearing headphones, they should leave this checked. If everybody is wearing headphones and have unchecked this, and you are getting some noisy, loopy, echoey feedback, just have everybody go in and turn this on and just be done with it. It's not that big of a deal. But ideally, you should be wearing headphones, and you should turn echo cancellation off so that you don't have any issues there. And that's pretty much it as far as the audio settings go. When you're recording, you're going to want to have each and every person go ahead with this process. Okay, so we have our settings all set and we're ready to go, ready to hit record. There is one last thing that we need to do before we hit that record button. Earlier, we set up our audio profile for original sound for musicians. And this, even though this is now our audio profile by default here, we don't have it turned on by default. And we need to make sure that each participant turns this on prior to recording. So when we're in our window here, our app window, you'll notice in the top corner, there's a sort of a tag here, original sound for musicians off. If we click this, it's going to turn it on and you'll see you'll get original sound for musicians is on, noise suppression is disabled. This is exactly what we want. We are now 100% ready to go for our recording. All right, guys, that's it. That is all the settings you'll need to prepare Zoom for your podcast recordings. Remember the on-call settings we just went through. Each individual participant that will be recorded needs to walk through those settings to prepare for the recording themselves. So just make sure that they're doing that. I hope this was helpful. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please drop it in the comments. We are planning on doing a few more of these in the future, a little bit more low-key casual, how-to walkthroughs and things like that. Maybe we'll do like a Zencastr or a Riverside.fm walkthrough in the future. So if you want to access the blog, we'll drop the link in the show notes. This will give you documentation for all the steps that we just went through. If you need this as a reference for later on, feel free to leverage that. And if you have any questions or you're having any trouble setting things up, feel free to contact us at the email in the show notes, or you can drop a comment as well. We'll be more than happy to help out. That's it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.